The Cambrian Explosion. How and why did it happen? The Cambrian Explosion occurred roughly 542 million years ago and lasted for about 20 million years. Even though it is referred to as an explosion, it was more of a radiation and was arguably the most significant evolutionary transition that has been observed in the fossil record. It was during this radiation that there was a sudden appearance of complex body plans, and most major animal groups started to appear in the fossil record. However, given that it was only over a period of 20 million years, it is still asked what sparked this sudden appearance and what organisms were living prior to it. Life was flourishing well before the Cambrian Explosion. During the Ediacaran period, there was a reasonable level of diversity with a variety of ancestral organisms present. Some of these organisms, such as vendobionts, were quite large, but very simple in structure, most likely absorbing nutrients through their body wall. They are now long extinct, but there are many fossils from the Ediacaran that appear to be similar to modern groups that are considered early stem taxa. Some of these include sponges, such as Paleophragmodictia reticulata, and bilaterians, such as Kimbrella quadrata, which are more mollusk-like organisms. Over the past few decades, there has been much disparity between scientists as to what ignited the Cambrian Explosion. Only recently has research put forward credible hypotheses that could explain this sudden emergence of diverse organisms. Could it have been a result of an increase in oxygen levels? Or perhaps global glaciation? Or maybe even the development of genes and genetics? Some of the most widespread hypotheses for the Cambrian Explosion is the idea of a sudden increase in oxygen levels over the Ediacaran-Cambrian boundary, levels which are similar to that observed in the atmosphere and oceans today. Research with ancient sediments have indicated that this might be the case, potentially due to an increase in photosynthesis from early plants. Such higher levels of oxygen would be able to better fuel an organism's metabolism, thus allowing the evolution of a larger, more complex organism. However, more recent research has implied that this may not be the case, as no significant increase in oxygen levels were identified in thousands of ancient rocks and sediment levels, with some suggesting that the role of oxygen had little influence, peaking and troughing over millions of years. Another theory is the result of global glaciation, also known as the snowball Earth hypothesis, where the entire Earth was covered in a layer of ice. Such a covering would have limited evolutionary niches and of course blocked sunlight to marine organisms, limiting the activities of cyanobacterial mats or algae that was around during the time. Upon recession of these glaciers, vast expanses would have been opened up, which in turn could drive evolution to cause a rapid expansion in the diversity of life, triggering the Cambrian Explosion. On the contrary, evidence does suggest that the snowball Earth ended some 635 million years ago, almost 90 million years before the Cambrian Explosion kicked off. In addition, it has been argued how an environmental change such as this would significantly influence new types of development and organisation with regards to an organism's morphology. There are those within the scientific community that have argued that the Cambrian Explosion might not have been due to environmental changes. Instead, it was a consequence of an expanding genome and the appearance of specific developmental genes. Some of these genes, such as Hox genes, are heavily involved in the development of organisms, with research showing that Hox genes work in the same way whether they are switched on in mice or fruit flies. Perhaps then the emergence of Hox genes and other important developmental factors during the late Ediacaran period allowed the rapid development of radical new body plans and subsequently the diversification of phyla. It also appears as though body plans have originated during the Cambrian Explosion have since plateaued, as there have been no obvious changes or innovations in body plans across many phyla. These hypotheses are perfectly plausible causes. However, much of the scientific literature does cast doubt on many of them. Only recently has new evidence begun to shed light on a definitive answer behind the Cambrian Explosion. In-depth studies have now suggested that small, temporary increases in oxygen levels in both the atmosphere and oceans could have been enough of a trigger, causing the Cambrian Explosion. Research has found that increases as little as 5% could have driven the emergence of predatory species. The emergence of these predators could have led to an evolutionary arms race between other organisms, thus causing the rapid explosion in body plan complexity observed in the fossil record. In summary, given the evidence currently available, many hypotheses are considered plausible. It may in fact be that a combination of these hypotheses acted as a trigger for the Cambrian explosion. And perhaps as more evidence and our knowledge of this era only increases, a clearer picture will develop behind such an extraordinary rise in organism diversity.